Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reedy with Future Pastimes, and I'm a designer on the expansions for the 2019 edition of the classic Dune board game published by Gale Force 9. And in this video, I wanted to spend some time talking about one specific treachery card in the game, and that card is Truthtrance. There are two Truthtrances in the treachery deck, and this is, I think, arguably the most divisive card in the game, even more than Poison Blade and Shield Snooper. And that is because of the way that Truthtrance has been exploited over 4 decades of gameplay and turned into a legal loophole dystopia of effects and situations. And certainly the last FAQ update that was authored by some of the original designers of Dune really only threw gasoline onto the fire with some of their responses to how to deal with Truthtrance. So let's talk about, first of all, what is Truthtrance and how does it work? So the card description here says, publicly ask one other player a single yes-no question about the game that must be answered publicly. The game pauses until an answer is given. The player must answer yes or no truthfully. So here's the original Truthtrance from the Avalon Hill edition, which you had to look up the effect on the player aid. But one of the, I think, the funny things in here is that on the Avalon Hill version, they did specify that the question has to relate to the game, which I understand that over the years there have been situations where people were playing Dune and someone played Truthtrance and then asked them a question that had nothing to do with the game, expecting them to answer truthfully. I can only imagine the sorts of terrible questions that may have been asked in this vein. But in terms of the effect for Dune, this is used to help players make decisions, usually about battles and other actions. But as I mentioned, it has been exploited in a number of ways, and I can give you a few examples. Some favorites are things like you ask somebody, here, Truthtrance, you must answer truthfully, yes or no. Will you have forces at the end of shimming and movement in the territory that I point to? Now, this question is asked, and the asker isn't pointing to a territory when they ask it. They're expecting an answer, and then based on that answer, they will then make some decisions. So they, after the player answers yes or no, then they point to Carthag, and you're like, oh, so that was the territory I was pointing to. Surprise. And you said yes, so now you have to end up putting your forces in there. Another classic that people like to cite is somebody who's holding two of the Truthtrance cards, and they play the first one, and their question is, will you answer yes to my next Truthtrance? So somebody who wants to strictly play the game by just a very narrow, rigid application of the rules will say, well, this is perfectly acceptable. Of course I can play a Truthtrance, ask you yes or no, will you answer my next Truthtrance? And then they can do whatever they want. Will you throw this battle for me and sacrifice all your forces? Oh, well, you said yes, so I guess you're going to have to do that. It probably is not hard to imagine that that is outside of the original design intent for Truthtrance. So the original designers, what they imagined Truthtrance being used for was information about a battle plan, by and large. So things like, are you going to play a projectile weapon, yes or no? And you say, oh, yes, and you go, great, I'm going to make a decision based on that. Or things like, is Jessica your traitor? No, like, great, I'm going to put her into my battle plan. And outside of a couple other things, like, oh, do you have the lace gun? And other things, they didn't really imagine players coming up with these really outrageous ways to force a player into making a decision about something ahead of time. And in the FAQ, one of the things that they're asked about is these things, like a question like, it's turn 2 and you ask somebody, in turn 6, will you move your forces into Arrakeen? And the idea that you're making a decision about something in turn 6 without knowing anything about what's going to occur in the turns leading up to it and what their state is. They may have all their forces in the tanks for all they know. How can you really be expected to answer that question truthfully? And so they interjected this notion of, if you're asked a question that you really can't give an answer to, you can say, I don't know. And with the idea being that the truth trance is not wasted, they would have to rephrase the question or play it again later on, or come up with a way that you can actually answer it. And that has clearly driven a lot of people crazy. They're like, oh, that's garbage. Why would you allow that in the rules? Destroy the FAQ or whatever. And the FAQ has got some issues, to be sure. I'm not sure that that's one of them. So for me, what I like to think about when I'm thinking about the application of truth trance is, let's go to the lore. Let's go to the book. What are we talking about when we're talking about a truth trance? Well, what we're not talking about is prescience in any form. The truth-sayers from the Bene Gesserit were used for interrogation. You were going to be asked about stuff that you had done or stuff that you had control over, and they would check whether or not you were being truthful about that. And that was their skill. And Reverend Mother Mohiam was the Emperor's personal truth-sayer. And so there are plenty of examples in the books about characters worrying about having to confront a truth-sayer. Probably the most obvious is all of the Harkonnen who were instructed to dump Jessica and Paul in the desert so that worms could eat them, so that if they were asked by a truth-sayer, did you kill these characters, they could truthfully say no. And they were given very explicit instructions about that. So this is not some casual element. It was a true concern of leaders in the Landsraad or anybody that might be brought before the Emperor or whomever and questioned about their actions. They were not going to be brought before a truth-sayer to say, in a year's time, will you be invading Arrakeen, and will Jessica be your traitor? That sort of thing. That was just not how truth-sayers were working in the Dune universe, in my opinion. So thinking about adding that effect to the game, the intention, of course, is to ask them about something that they have complete knowledge of and using it in that regard. It's less about interrogating you, like, did you play a laser gun in that last battle? Everybody knows that you did. So that's really not, that's where you're going to deviate a little bit from the lore. But I think about you're not being brought before the truth-sayer to make predictions about future actions. And so I don't like to even think about using this card that way when I play Dune. I try to stick a little bit closer if I can, if I can't be tempted otherwise, to the original design intent for the application on there. Now, you're going to have to make your own decision with you and your play group playing Dune. Are you going to try to adhere more closely to the designer's original intent for an effect like Truth Trance? Or do you say, no, let's go ahead and take advantage of forcing somebody to commit to actions in the future based on how they answer this? It leaves kind of a bad taste in my mouth, and I've done it a couple of times just to try to prove a point, and I know that the person on the other end of those types of questions was very uncomfortable. They didn't like it. A lot of them threw their hands up, and they're like, well, this is what we've come to expect from this card. There's nothing I can really do about it, but I would kind of urge the Dune community at large to kind of revisit this and maybe agree on certain parameters of like a list of examples. Maybe that's asking too much, but I would enjoy it much more for my gameplay. And I think this is what we're talking about. We're talking about playing Dune together and enjoying the gameplay. So having a card that comes up and is just so utterly abused, it just makes my skin crawl. I don't even like it when, the Atreides is about to use their prescience, and then you interrupt them with the Truthtrance, so that you can basically use it as a loophole to get out of having to worry about what the Atreides are going to do. Even that, I'm loath to even pull that move. Just don't like it. I just think it's really kind of outside of the spirit of the game. That's what Karama's for, not using the Truthtrance to force Atreides to commit to playing a projectile weapon or whatever the case may be, just so that you can go, yeah, I'm going to play a shield. So because I've heard your question and I'm interrupting the answer. I like effects to be resolved. You resolve Atreides' prescience, and then you ask the Truthtrance. Is how I would have done it if I had been involved in the rule writing back when I was 12, when the rules were put together. And it may have been an opportunity to revisit it in the Gale Force 9 edition. Maybe in a future edition, that sort of thing will be cleared up. If we add Truthtrance to Dune Conquest, you can rest assured that it will not be as wide open as the Gale Force 9's 2019 edition of Dune. It'll have some more constraints and guardrails. And that version of Dune is designed to be more accessible to a wider range of gamers. It's not just for the hardcore gamers like us, but for casual gamers as well. And I think this sort of abused effect would not go over well with that particular crowd. So those are my thoughts on Truthtrance. Share your thoughts on them. Tell me some of your favorite Truthtrance horror stories. I'd love to hear those. And any other thoughts you have on this card. Where do you fall on what should be allowed with it? How much into the realm of prescience do you like or want to allow Truthtrance to exist and operate? Or would you prefer to see a Truthtrance that has a little bit more of a clear definition of the way it is supposed to be applied? That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.